Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Fishing System in Food Wars World. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 121, A New Fishing Haul, Gourmet Cells. According to what you're saying, we special class chefs, strictly speaking, don't actually count as special class? We've only just stepped one foot into it, is that right? After listening, Mana Nakiri was silent for a moment, then asked. Honestly, the news was a bombshell. It effectively invalidated the status of every special class chef in the world. That's not quite it. It's just a matter of terminology, Yuki stated. Although his ranks were determined by the system, he couldn't just impose them on the Food Wars world. The special class rank had existed in the Food Wars world for so long, how they classified it was their own business. Ultimately, after some discussion among them, they decided to divide special class chefs into 3 stages: Junior, Intermediate, and Senior. After that would be Yuki's level. As for Yuki's level, they decided to call it Transcendent Class. This level represented that Yuki had already broken the current structure of the culinary world, hence the name. And Mana Nakiri felt that very few people could reach this level. Even though Yuki had now told them the method to reach this level, wanting to improve one's culinary heart wasn't that simple. The difficulty of improving culinary heart was very high. Without a cheat like Yuki's, one could only rely on slowly honing it themselves, which required a vast amount of time. Becoming a special class chef was already hard enough. How many special class chefs were there in the entire world? Let alone advancing to the higher transcendent class. After they finished their discussion, Mana Nakiri called in over. Now, although An was still her secretary, Mana, having recovered somewhat, could do many things herself. She no longer needed An to be by her side all the time. Lady Mana, did you need something? An asked upon seeing Mana. Mana then told An the news she had just received from Yuki and Joichiro. Compile this information into a document, and then publish it. The structure of the culinary world has already changed. After Mana Nakiri finished speaking, and finally recovered from her shock. Afterwards, she quickly left, compiled Mana's words into a document, and published it on WGO's official website. This document was very important. So, when it was published, WGO's official website sent notification messages to all chefs registered on the site. In the Food Wars world, almost all chefs were registered with WGO. After all, certification exams also needed to be taken at WGO. During the examination, their information was naturally entered, which was equivalent to being registered. Only some midnight chefs wouldn't receive the notification. Reclassifying special class above first class, and confirming a transcendent class above special class? Is this a joke? Today isn't April Fool's Day. Why is WGO starting to joke around? Someone expressed their disbelief after seeing the document published by WGO. How could it be a joke? There's such a large document right on WGO's homepage. All other news has been removed. And look who determined this ranking system, it was Officer Yuki. Although he's only a first-class officer, everyone knows his culinary skills are the strongest. Right now, the WGO has certified only one transcendent class chef, and it's Officer Yuki. It's unbelievable, a kid in his teens has already reached such a height. Another chef directly refuted the previous one's words. He was a die-hard fan of Yuki. Seeing this news came from Yuki, and that Yuki had broken through special class to reach the even higher transcendent class, made him very excited. As soon as these words were out, the others around nodded. Indeed, Yuki's name carried that much weight. And WGO couldn't possibly joke about such matters. So, this news was definitely true. And the culinary world had welcomed its strongest existence, that is, Yuki. It could be said that the entire hierarchy of high-level chefs in the culinary world was directly rewritten by Yuki. WGO also calls Officer Yuki the pioneer of the culinary world. That title really fits. Everyone felt this title of pioneer was very appropriate after seeing it. After all, Yuki had truly blazed a new trail. This wasn't just theory, it had already been put into practice. Yuki himself was the living proof that one could reach the transcendent level. The entire culinary world was shaken by this news. At the same time, the special-class chefs throughout the culinary world obviously saw this news. They gained a clearer positioning of themselves, knowing what level they were at within special class. At the same time, they were incredibly amazed by Yuki. He had helped them scout out the path ahead, now it was just waiting for them to walk it. It could be said that these special-class chefs now all owed Yuki a favor. I was thinking he'd quiet down for a while. Didn't expect him to be holding back such a huge move. At Nakiri International, so Nakiri was speechless looking at WGO's news. Ever since Yuki awakened his special ability, he would cause some commotion every once in a while. It was fine at first, just causing a stir at Tatsuki. Afterwards, he went over to WGO, and the commotion got bigger and bigger. Seeing Yuki had quieted down for this period, he never thought the guy was actually charging up a super move. The shock level of this news was indeed beyond imagination. Ha 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 ha. Pioneer of the culinary world. Yuki really is something. At the Tatsuki resort, extremely loud laughter erupted from Jin Dojima's office. For the resort members, Dojima's laughter didn't surprise them. Because they knew very well the relationship between Yuki and Dojima. Even before Yuki awakened his special ability, Dojima had taken great care of him. So, with Yuki achieving such accomplishments, Dojima would clearly be happy. And they were very envious of Dojima. With Yuki reaching such heights, he naturally couldn't forget Dojima. Actually, this had already been demonstrated before. The relationship between Yuki and Dojima wasn't a secret. So, many people, after finding they couldn't get on good terms with Yuki, decisively chose to get on good terms with Dojima instead. Even the Nakiri family was no exception. Yuki himself, whenever he got some good ingredients, would also send a portion to Dojima. Dojima's care for him had always been genuine. The entire culinary world was shaken by Yuki's matter. And Yuki, at this moment, didn't have much mind to pay attention to what was happening outside. He was preparing to fish. After all, with a breakthrough in his culinary level, Yuki received a new growth bait. Yuki knew very well the benefits of growth bait. So now, he began a new fishing session. Soon, there was movement in the pond. And this time, the movement was very large. After a huge ball of light was pulled out of the water, Yuki finally knew what he had caught this time. Hiss. My luck is really off the charts this time. I actually fished out a treasure like this. After receiving the item information, Yuki's eyes widened because this time he had truly fished out something good. Its value was even higher than the food honor he had fished out before. This time, Yuki fished out gourmet cells. That's right, the fundamental power source from the world of Toriko. Keep in mind, items fished out by growth bait had a characteristic: they possessed extremely strong growth potential. Gourmet cells inherently had such an effect. Eating ingredients from the world of Toriko could allow gourmet cells to continuously improve. But gourmet cells also had an upper limit. In the original story, when Toriko and others improved their strength, they were actually continuously acquiring the power of appetite demons. The upper limit of gourmet cells was the upper limit of the appetite demon. This was why everyone ate these ingredients, but in the end, the difference in their strength was so large. The stronger the appetite demon residing in the gourmet cells, the stronger the wielder of the gourmet cells would be. The gourmet cells Yuki drew had a very special characteristic: after he fused with these gourmet cells, no appetite demon would reside within his body. Having an appetite demon reside within had its pros and cons. The good part was that appetite demons themselves had their own unique moves. Toriko's various moves came from his appetite demon. As for the drawback, that was one might eventually be devoured by the appetite demon, thereby becoming nourishment for the appetite demon's revival. And with another soul in one's body, everything one did would be clearly seen by the other party. Yuki definitely didn't want such a situation to occur, so these gourmet cells not being inhabited by an appetite demon was naturally a good thing. Moreover, growth-type gourmet cells had a characteristic: they could grow indefinitely. This was much better than those gourmet cells in the original story. After all, once completely fused with an appetite demon, the period of rapid strength increase would end. Afterwards, there would be no appetite demon power for them to develop, they could only become stronger themselves. Yuki's gourmet cells didn't have such a worry. As long as there was good food, and the level was sufficient, then his strength could continue to improve indefinitely. Chapter 122. Gourmet Cell Fusion, Soaring Physical Attributes, Superbait. Yuki's gourmet cells possessed infinite possibilities. Although there was no appetite demon, he could develop similar abilities based on the abilities of other appetite demons. In other words, Yuki could even replicate the abilities of multiple appetite demons, and there would be no lack of means. The value of these gourmet cells was much higher than the previous food honor. However, Yuki didn't rashly fuse with these gourmet cells directly. Once gourmet cells were fused, they would develop the cells within the body, increasing the cell's calorie storage limit. At that time, the body would rapidly strengthen, and the calories within the body would be rapidly consumed. Once these gourmet cells were fused, it was equivalent to awakening simultaneously. Possessing gourmet cells and awakening them were two completely different concepts. There were also risks for people possessing gourmet cells who wanted to awaken them. In the original story, Sunny had told Komatsu that the awakening process was very dangerous. While Yuki's gourmet cells wouldn't have any risks, he still needed a large amount of food to compensate for the body's depletion. So, before fusing, Yuki still needed to prepare a large amount of food. Since Yuki wanted to fuse the gourmet cells as soon as possible, he naturally wouldn't cook so seriously. He planned to just roast the ingredients he had fished out from the system before. This happened to be what he was best at. This improvement enhanced his vision, touch, inferno, and ki a lot. To avoid alarming the Polar Star residents, Yuki found an uninhabited place and began to roast various ingredients. It was a good thing Tatsuki was large enough, and there were many empty places, so it wasn't likely to be noticed by others. The reason Yuki left Polar Star was to prevent himself from scaring everyone later. After all, the appetite of someone who had fused with gourmet cells was quite astonishing. Tens or hundreds of tons of food would be eaten by you in minutes. This appetite would scare others. At a deserted area in Tatsuki, the entire place was now covered in flames. To the side, a massive pile of roasted food was stacked, likely weighing hundreds of tons. Of these foods, only a small portion were ingredients from the world of Toriko. The rest was just average ingredients. It couldn't be helped Yuki also didn't have so many ingredients from the world of Toriko, so now he could only use normal ingredients. These ingredients were all fished out by Small Bait. Besides occasionally fishing out ingredients from the world of Toriko, Small Bait mostly fished out some average ingredients, and in extremely large quantities. So, Yuki now roasted several hundred tons of food at once. This should be enough, right? Now, fuse the gourmet cells. Looking at so much food, Yuki felt that for just the initial fusion and awakening of gourmet cells, this amount should be sufficient. Glancing at the mountain of food piled beside him, Yuki directly fused the gourmet cells. The gourmet cells merged into his body, and calories were rapidly consumed to strengthen his physique. Yuki's body shriveled at a speed visible to the naked eye. If not for these ingredients, rashly fusing gourmet cells, I probably wouldn't have lasted 5 seconds before being completely drained. Yuki sucked in a sharp breath looking at his body's changes. The consumption during gourmet cell fusion was indeed very large. And his gourmet cells were the type with almost no risk. One could imagine just how high the risk was for others when awakening gourmet cells. Looking at his shriveled body, Yuki began to eat rapidly. Don't be fooled by the mountain of ingredients here. As long as Yuki swallowed it, his terrifying digestive ability would instantly break it down, not even leaving any residue. At this moment, Yuki didn't care about table manners. Even bones were like tofu in his mouth, easily crushed and digested. Yuki at this moment was like a food-devouring machine. The small mountain piled up from hundreds of tons of food rapidly shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. Ultimately, in less than 10 minutes, the food before him was completely eaten by Yuki. Actually, when about 1/10 was left, Yuki had already completed the gourmet cell fusion, and his body had returned to normal. But he could still eat the remaining food. So, in the end, these tens of tons of food were eaten clean by him. People possessing gourmet cells. Every one of them was a super big eater. At this moment, Yuki's body muscles weren't as exaggerated as Toriko and the others, looking full of explosive power. P.S. A physique similar to Toji Fushiguro's. Yuki could clearly feel that his body density had increased a lot. With his current physique, he should weigh around 50 or 60 kilograms. But he now found that his weight had already exceeded 200 kilograms. However, he possessed food honor, and it was almost at the mastery level. Food honor at this level gave him ultimate control over his body, so such a weight wouldn't be apparent. Furthermore, Yuki could clearly sense the terrifying power within his body. At this moment, a casual punch from him could create a large crater in the ground. However, this was ultimately still Totsuki. Yuki wouldn't try it here. After tidying things up, Yuki returned to Polar Star. Now, although he had gourmet cells, there was another problem: he lacked ingredients. While he could use the system's small bait to fish for ingredients from the world of Toriko, the ingredients fished out were not only extremely few in quantity but also low in level. Just now, after Yuki perfectly fused the gourmet cells, he ate those ingredients. Ingredients from the world of Toriko were the best nourishment for gourmet cell improvement. But the effect was best only when eaten for the first time. Eating them again afterwards would only lead to slow improvement. Yuki had already eaten all the ingredients from the world of Toriko that he possessed just now. So, if he fished out these repetitive ingredients again, then they would be almost useless. Furthermore, the level of the ingredients was too low, they simply couldn't provide enough energy for his gourmet cells to level up. But even so, Yuki was very satisfied because the physical attributes improved during the gourmet cell fusion were already formidable enough. In the Food Wars world, Yuki was now truly afraid of nothing as long as no one directly hit him in the face with a nuclear bomb. But thinking about it carefully, who in this world would use a nuclear bomb to hit him? So, Yuki was now invincible in this world. After returning to Polar Star, everyone didn't know Yuki had left or, even less, that Yuki had fused with such an overpowered thing. Yuki's life continued as peacefully as ever. During this period, the battle for Elite 10 seats began within the school. After all, the third-year students had graduated. With their graduation, many Elite 10 seats were vacated. A new round of Elite 10 contention began. Everyone returned to participate. However, Yuki didn't get involved. With his status, he simply didn't need to become an Elite 10 member. He didn't want to get involved in these troubles either. But the other Polar Star residents were different. Megumi Tadakoro, Alice Nakiri, and the others participated in the Elite 10 competition. Their culinary skills were only stronger, not weaker, than the Elite 10. Many students from the new first year also participated, trying to replicate Irina Nakiri's previous operation. Obtaining the title of Elite 10 while still in middle school was quite impressive. Many knew their culinary skills simply couldn't reach that level, they were happy to try their luck. What if they succeeded? But alas! The generation they encountered was the Jewel generation, so there was no chance for them to shine. Although not all Polar Star residents became Elite 10 members, more than half of the Elite 10 were now from Polar Star. This made Fumio Daimito very happy. The glory Yuki brought had already put Polar Star in everyone's eyes, and this glory was destined not to be surpassed. With more than half of the Elite 10 at Polar Star, how could she not be happy? After everyone participated in the Elite 10 battle, even though the vacation was still long, they didn't go back home. The reason was simple: the Elite 10 were managers. They would be responsible for the work of the upcoming school opening. Even if they didn't know how yet, the previous cohort of Elite 10 would be responsible for teaching them. While the Polar Star people were busy arranging matters for the next semester, Yuki, on his side, finally welcomed his second super bait fishing session. It had now been a year since he activated the system. In 1 year, Yuki had already stood at the pinnacle of the Food Wars world. Cheap players were just like that. In 1 year, they achieved what others couldn't achieve in a lifetime. Super bait was what Yuki anticipated most. After all, last time, super bait had fished out Food Honor. While not as good as his previous growth bait, he was still very much looking forward to super bait. As Yuki began to fish, soon, a ball of light was pulled out of the water. Information entered Yuki's mind at this moment. Evolving taste in World Gate to Toriko World? Good stuff. Chapter 123, Evolving Taste, World Gate to Toriko, Arrival in Gourmet Town. Another one of the 5 senses. Evolving taste, this time? Evolving taste, an incredibly useful tool for any chef. Yuki integrated it without a second thought. That made 3 of the 5 senses collected. Just 2 to go. And the other reward, World Gate. As the name implied, it could cross worlds. This World Gate was one that could lead to the world of Toriko. In the world of Food Wars, Yuki had undoubtedly already stood at the pinnacle. The subsequent path could only be explored by himself. But the world of Toriko was different. Its culinary arts would inevitably crush those of the Food Wars world. Being able to go to the world of Toriko would naturally allow him to grow faster than staying in the Food Wars world. Moreover, this World Gate wasn't a one-time use. Yuki could return at any time. And once he left the Food Wars world, the time flow rate between the 2 worlds would change. If he stayed in the world of Toriko for a year, only 1 day would pass in the Food Wars world. By the same token, if he went to the world of Toriko and then returned to Food Wars, staying in Food Wars for a year would only mean 1 day passed in the world of Toriko. The time flow rate on both sides meant Yuki didn't need to worry about anything. And he could return at any time. He didn't have to worry about what might happen during his absence. The most crucial abilities on his body, Gourmet Cells, Food Honor, and Bu, these things were all from the world of Toriko. During the time skip, Yuki received a reward from the system Enbu, a unique martial arts discipline that is unique to the inhabitants of Area 7, the domain of one of the 8 kings, the Monkey King, Bambina. Yuki had already developed Food Honor to almost the mastery level and mastered food immersion. As for Enbu, although it was better to train with special ingredient props in the world of Toriko, it could still be continuously improved in other worlds. But Gourmet Cells were completely different. To improve Gourmet Cells, there were only 2 methods. One was to eat various gourmet foods from the world of Toriko. The rarer and higher the level, the greater the improvement. Yuki's Gourmet Cells were very special. Because they didn't have an appetite demon, he didn't need to find a suitable full-course menu for himself. The setting of a full-course menu wasn't just a feature of the world of Toriko. The ingredients in a full-course menu were generally the most suitable for one's own Gourmet Cells. If one didn't eat all these ingredients and rashly revived the appetite demon, then one would definitely be devoured by the appetite demon, ultimately becoming nourishment for the appetite demon's revival. Conversely, if all these ingredients were eaten, then after the appetite demon revived, it would also be devoured again by the host, thereby truly reaching the level of death. At this time, everything about the appetite demon would be integrated into the host's body. Yuki had no appetite demon in his body, so he didn't need to worry about these things. And these Gourmet Cells were fished out from the system. Even without an appetite demon, his Gourmet Cells could simulate the abilities of other appetite demons. Of course, the premise was that the Gourmet Cell level was sufficient, otherwise, it was impossible to use such moves. Simulating them would be in vain. For people in the world of Toriko, this was the only way to improve the level of Gourmet Cells. But Yuki was different because his Gourmet Cells were growth type. As Yuki's chef rank improved, the level of his Gourmet Cells would also improve. Yuki didn't know how strong his Gourmet Cells were now because there was no specific positioning. He could only compare it to the levels in the world of Toriko. His current combat power was probably around level 50 or 60. After all, the destructive power of his punch now indeed surpassed the level of a missile by a lot. In the world of Toriko, the power of a fist reaching the missile level was about level 60. Of course, the power of this missile was the power in the world of Toriko. The technology in the world of Toriko was far superior to the world of Food Wars. And Yuki was proficient in Food Honor and had learned Enbu, so the power of his fist far surpassed the missiles of the Food Wars world. A cell level of 50 or 60 was his own conservative estimate. As for how high his destructive power had reached, Yuki wasn't clear on this point. But in Yuki's view, it probably hadn't broken 100 yet. Yuki knew very well how strong the destructive power was after breaking 100. The Fang King, Geo, from the four-beast main body was a typical example. One swipe of its claw, and the aftershock could directly blow people 5 kilometers away. The destructive power was incredibly astonishing. Yuki's punch now still couldn't reach this level. It was lacking quite a bit. So, Yuki estimated his combat power hadn't reached level 100 yet. As for his cell level, it was probably around 50 or 60. Everything still had to be figured out after entering the world of Toriko. Of course, before entering the world of Toriko, Yuki still had to make some plans, that is, the arrangements after entering that world. The world of Toriko emphasized factions. Building a good relationship with IGO, International Gourmet Organization, was beyond doubt. As for the Gourmet Corp, those guys were already like rats scurrying across the street. Although very strong, Yuki didn't hope to live so darkly. So, it was necessary to build a good relationship with IGO. After all, many special ingredients were under IGO's control. Average people were not allowed to enter those ecological areas. Don't look at how Toriko and others could go to these places casually in the original story. Their status was that of the 4 heavenly kings, raised by Ichiryu himself. It could be said that these 4 people in IGO were like princes, with very high authority. So, Yuki had to build a good relationship with IGO. As for what method to use, Yuki could only think of Granny Setsuno. To go to these ecological areas, one must have a sufficiently high status and position. Directly joining IGO, even though, with his strength, he would definitely be constantly watched after joining. After all, a powerhouse with no background suddenly joining, unless it was Ichiryu personally inviting him to join, he would definitely be under scrutiny by the people of IGO. Even in the original story, the boss of the Gourmet Yakuza was personally invited by Ichiryu to join. But the other members of the Biotope Zero still looked down on him. They wouldn't target him openly, but they would still gossip behind his back. So, directly joining could only be a backup plan. Yuki still had the line of Granny Setsuno. Of course, to connect with this line also required a prerequisite, that Komatsu hadn't yet brewed the century soup. This way, Yuki could use the century soup as a bargaining chip to connect with Granny Setsuno. As for how to explain how he knew these things, Yuki hadn't even considered it because it wasn't important. With the abilities of Granny Setsuno and others, they could tell at a glance whether he was lying or not. So, it was better to just maintain a bit of mystery. He still understood the principle of the more you say, the more you go wrong. He didn't need Granny Setsuno to have much goodwill towards him, he just needed this springboard. As long as Granny Setsuno was willing to help, his subsequent collection of these ingredients would be much smoother. Honestly, without a certain level of strength, Yuki would absolutely not consider going to the gourmet world. After all, the gourmet world was too dangerous. The beasts in the human world had distributed areas. You go to the corresponding area based on how strong you are. But the gourmet world was completely different. The gourmet world had no fixed areas, various powerful beasts ran around everywhere. If your luck was bad, you might encounter one of the 8 kings right at the entrance to the gourmet world. So, without a certain level of strength, Yuki absolutely wouldn't go to the gourmet world. He wasn't Toriko, that reckless youth. If that guy hadn't had strong enough gourmet luck, he would have become a corpse the first time he entered the gourmet world. So, Yuki had to collect enough special ingredients in the human world to improve his strength. Actually, Yuki had another point. The culinary systems of different worlds were different. Perhaps his culinary system could attract Granny Setsuno's attention. At that time, using the century soup as a door opener, and then showcasing his culinary skills, it would be best to build a good relationship. If a good relationship couldn't be built, he still had to strive for some benefits as much as possible. This way, it would be a bit better after arriving in the gourmet world. Yuki didn't have the background of the four heavenly kings. Wherever he went in the gourmet world, someone would receive him. The success of Toriko and others in the original story was indispensable from the help of the indigenous people of the gourmet world. After making a series of plans, Yuki also suppressed his aura to the extreme. Proficient in food honor, plus having learned Enbu, as long as he didn't land in the gourmet world or the headquarters of an organization like IGO, he actually didn't need to worry about his safety. But in the world of Toriko, he didn't dare to be reckless. He made full preparations, at least not to be instantly killed. After preparing these things, Yuki told everyone he was going out for a trip and then directly found an uninhabited place and passed through the world gate to the world of Toriko. The moment he arrived in the world of Toriko, Yuki's perception fully opened up. Good, it's around a human city. This city, the gate actually sent me directly to Gourmet Town. That's convenient for me. Yuki found that the place he appeared was near Gourmet Town in the world of Toriko. The most iconic thing was the Gourmet Towers. Gourmet Town was where many powerful chefs from the human world were located. Among them, the most famous was Yuta, the king of medicinal cuisine, at the top floor. His culinary skills were among the top tier in the world of Toriko. Besides Yuta, Granny Setsuno was also in Gourmet Town. However, Granny Setsuno wasn't in the core area of Gourmet Town but near the outskirts. Granny Setsuno had opened a Setsuno dining hall there. The style was continued from hundreds of years ago, looking like a very old, small, and dilapidated cafeteria restaurant. Of course, that was only its appearance. The area of Granny Setsuno's kitchen was truly scary. Yuki even suspected if Granny Setsuno had hollowed out the entire underground of Gourmet Town to build her kitchen. Yuki had originally been thinking about how to determine the time and find Granny Setsuno. Now that he was in Gourmet Town, it was naturally much more convenient. Getting an identity in this era actually wasn't hard. Although this world was also a modern world, due to the large number of beasts in the wild, a portion of humanity lived continuously in the wild. So, applying for an identity shouldn't be difficult. But obtaining currency was a bit difficult. Yuki could only use the ingredients he fished out from his space to exchange for currency. As for gold and similar things, this world was too rich in resources. If nothing else, just the various resources in the Gourmet Desert Labyrinth, they were inexhaustible, just lying there openly. So, these things weren't valuable. What was truly valuable were the various ingredients. Chapter 124, First Meeting with Setsuno, A Way to Regain Youth. Existences like Setsuno and the medicinal cuisine King Yuta were, first and foremost, long-lived. Especially Setsuno, who was already over 500 years old. Secondly, their food honor had long since reached mastery. Yuki's advantages were completely non-existent in front of them. So, when facing these chefs, Yuki couldn't just leapfrog ranks. However, thinking about Setsuno and the others' ages, Yuki suddenly realized he seemed to have another bargaining chip. His ki had grown to such an extent that he could now directly plunder others' lifespan and transfer it to other people. In the world of Toriko, don't be fooled by how Setsuno and the others had lived for over 500 years. Ichiryu, Jiro, and Midora were fine, but Setsuno was different. Her gourmet cell potential couldn't compare to these three. So, after several hundred years, her lifespan was already running low. Besides that, there was also her aged appearance. Knocking Master Jiro and the others could preserve their youth. It was just that Jiro, because of Setsuno, had taken on the form of a little old man. Using acupressure techniques could allow one to temporarily return to their peak period. Granny Iam from the former first biotope was like this. But once subjected to a severe impact, it would become ineffective. So, Setsuno hadn't used this method to return to a youthful state because she knew it was false. But if she could truly return to a youthful state, then for Setsuno, it would undoubtedly be good news. What woman doesn't love beauty? Setsuno was the same. Yuki hadn't thought of this before. Now he found his bargaining chips had increased again. If these 2 chips were thrown out, although he couldn't guarantee he could max out Setsuno's favorability, it would be enough for both Setsuno and Knocking Master Jiro to owe him a very large favor. Thinking of this, Yuki walked towards the city. The core area of Gourmet Town required swiping a Gourmet ID and buying a ticket to enter, but the peripheral areas didn't. Yuki didn't plan to go to the core area, after all, Setsuno wasn't there. Afterwards, Yuki asked a few passers-by about the location of Setsuno Dining Hall. Setsuno's fame was super high, everyone naturally knew where her dining hall was. It was just that normally no one went to Setsuno Dining Hall. The reason was simple: Setsuno didn't open the restaurant for profit. Entertaining guests was all based on the mood of the ingredients. If the ingredients felt it was okay, then she would entertain guests once. So, the opening times of Setsuno Dining Hall were always random. Sometimes it might be open for several consecutive days, but sometimes it might only open once every few months. Besides that, Yuki inquired about matters concerning the century soup. In the original story, Komatsu creating the century soup caused a huge stir, known by everyone. So, such a thing could be found out just by asking around. The final result he got was that Komatsu hadn't made the century soup yet, so Yuki's door opener could still be used. This is certainly abrupt. After finding Setsuno Dining Hall, Yuki looked at the building before him and found it somewhat amusing. Setsuno Dining Hall could be said to embody old, dilapidated, and small. To its left was a huge castle, to its right was also a tall skyscraper. Sandwiched in the middle, Setsuno Dining Hall was just an ordinary small, flat-roofed building. Yuki estimated this dining hall had probably existed for several hundred years. Perhaps it was out of nostalgia for the past, so this dining hall had never been renovated. Setsuno wasn't the type to be indifferent to fame and fortune. The chef organization under Setsuno was the largest chef organization in the entire human world. During the Four Beast incident, others could barely scrape together a few thousand or 10,000 chefs, but Setsuno alone brought out over 1 million chefs. This number was really horrifying. And wanting to join Setsuno's banner, not just any chef could. The 1 million or so chefs Setsuno temporarily gathered were all elites among chefs. No longer focusing on the appearance of Setsuno Dining Hall, Yuki directly knocked on the door. Although Setsuno was very famous, no one had the audacity to just come and knock on her door. After all, Setsuno was one of the gourmet national treasures. With this resounding reputation, no one would want to come and challenge her. What's more, Setsuno was good friends with IGO's chairman, Ichiryu. And her partner was the Knocking Master Jiro. So, whoever troubled Setsuno, the final outcome wouldn't be good. After Yuki knocked on the door, after a while, the door opened. However, the person standing inside wasn't Setsuno, but another short young girl. Yuki knew this girl. She was Nono, Setsuno's apprentice. Her culinary skills were very strong, and her ability was ice-based. In the original story, after Midora destroyed the ecosystem of the human world, Nono used her ice to preserve a large amount of food in advance. "Hello, may I help you?" Nono wasn't arrogant at all due to her high status. On the contrary, Nono was a very polite person, and she was like this to everyone. "Hello, my name is Yuki. I have something concerning the century soup that I'd like to discuss with Setsuno." Yuki directly stated his purpose. As soon as these words were out, Nono's expression changed. She knew the importance of the century soup to her master. Since she started following Setsuno, she knew Setsuno had been researching the century soup all along. But now, almost 100 years had passed, and Setsuno's research still hadn't succeeded. As for how Yuki knew Setsuno was researching the century soup, actually, many guests had tasted the incomplete century soup. "Mr. Yuki, please come in. I'll go find my master now." Saying this, Nono directly let Yuki in. Though she didn't know what information Yuki had about the century soup, she knew very well now that she needed to let her master make the decision. After pouring Yuki a cup of tea, Nono directly entered the underground kitchen. Yuki wasn't in a hurry either, slowly drinking his tea and waiting. It had to be said, the various ingredients in the world of Toriko were truly excellent. The tea in the cup before him was very good. This was the best tea he had ever drunk among all the teas he had tasted. Soon, Nono and an old lady with pink hair walked out from the underground kitchen. "A pleasure to meet you, Granny Setsuno. I'm Yuki." An old chef several hundred years old with super strong skills, Yuki was very respectful. He stood up and greeted Setsuno upon seeing her. While he knew he was about to make a deal with her, the necessary courtesy couldn't be absent. "So young, yet you've already trained food honor to almost the mastery level. Impressive." Setsuno was somewhat surprised the moment she saw Yuki. She could see that Yuki wasn't old, yet at this age, he had already trained food honor to this level. "Alright, let's talk about your purpose for coming to see me. Since you came here, then you must have grasped some good information, right?" Setsuno knew very well that since Yuki came to her, the information he has must be quite important. "Then I'll get straight to the point. Regarding the century soup, I don't know how many types of ingredients are needed to make it, nor what ingredients are needed. But I know the indispensable key to completing the century soup. This key lies within the century soup itself," Yuki said. As soon as these words were out, Setsuno was taken aback for a moment. She seemed to have grasped something, but it was still somewhat vague. But she knew that what Yuki said must be useful. This might really be the key to completing the century soup. Continued, Setsuno felt that today, the century soup might just reappear. The century soup is a miraculous dish completed only after 100 years of sedimentation in the ice hell. The essence extracted from the gourmet showcase needs to settle for 100 years before it can form the century soup. The birth of the century soup cannot do without the precipitation of time. This is something humans cannot replace. So, the key to completing the century soup lies in the century soup itself. Wanting to bypass the long period of sedimentation in a special environment, perhaps the soup itself is needed as a catalyst, Yuki said. Having said this much, a super chef like Setsuno could not understand. This was like making stinky tofu. It needed time to ferment. Although in this era, some people had mastered special bacterial strains and could perhaps complete it in a short time. But the qualitative change of the century soup, which occurred only after 100 years of sedimentation, was not a process that could be easily skipped. Setsuno's century soup had actually already reached its limit. Perhaps it just needed to settle for a long time in a specific environment to be completed. Komatsu, on the other hand, had taken a shortcut. Because the Wall Penguin clan lived in the ice hell year-round and could drink the century soup. So, from the birth of the century soup, their clan had been drinking it. Over time, the century soup was passed down through their genes. There was another similar example. The Monkey King clan. Back then, a certain generation of the Monkey King, due to greed, directly drank the source of pear. Ultimately, this led to pear parasitizing it and being continuously passed down with its descendants. The Wall Penguins drinking the century soup was like this. In Yuki's view, it wasn't necessarily that one needed to use the Wall Penguin's saliva. Perhaps the Wall Penguin's blood, tears, including the Wall Penguin itself, were all catalysts for the century soup. Chapter 125. Yuki hears the voice of all ingredients, the allure of gyros knocking techniques. I see. I really forgot this most crucial step. Setsuno had a sudden realization. As Yuki said, she had overlooked something. But with Yuki's reminder, she had now remembered. The maturation time for the century soup is almost here. Perhaps just one drop of the soup is needed to complete the catalysis. Setsuno hadn't thought of the Wall Penguins. This was very normal. After all, they didn't know the Wall Penguins had been drinking the century soup for generations, so much so that it had even been etched into their genes. The information you brought is very useful. This is the key to completing the century soup, so, what do you want in exchange for this information? Setsuno asked. The price of the information Yuki brought was very high, especially for her. While Setsuno wasn't researching the century soup every single moment. Over the past 100 years, the century soup had taken up a great deal of her energy. Even having reached this step, she was still stuck on the final one. Actually, Setsuno had discovered the problem: the century soup didn't seem to be meant to be made by her. As a super high-level chef, she knew very well that if an ingredient acknowledged her, it would proactively tell her how to prepare this dish. But if the ingredient didn't acknowledge her, then even being only one step away from success was useless. So, in the original story, Setsuno found Komatsu for help, letting Komatsu try to make the century soup because she knew the ingredients didn't acknowledge her, which was why she was stuck at the final step. Setsuno's approach was quite normal. If she could have succeeded, she wouldn't have remained in this state. 100 years' time had worn away her patience. I want to exchange for some convenience. I possess gourmet cells, and to improve gourmet cells, various kinds of ingredients are needed. Many of these ingredients are in IGO's ecological areas. But these areas don't allow outsiders to enter freely. So, I want to freely hunt various ingredients. Yuki said. He knew very well that the importance of the information he brought absolutely exceeded what he needed. Setsuno herself had drunk the century soup. She knew very well that the century soup was useful even for old monsters like them who had lived for hundreds of years. Keep in mind, their gourmet cells, after hundreds of years of growth, had eaten countless high-level ingredients from the gourmet world. Now, wanting to make their gourmet cells react was quite difficult. But the century soup could do this. So, Yuki just exchanging for the right to hunt, this shouldn't be a problem. Just that? Hearing this, Setsuno was taken aback for a moment. She never expected Yuki to exchange for something this simple. She just needed to make a phone call to Ichiryu, and it would be done for her. This could be said to be a matter as small as could be. There is another thing. I want to compete with you, Yuki stated. Compete with Master? Hearing this, before Setsuno could say much, Nono first exclaimed in surprise. She knew very well how strong her master was. Setsuno was a gourmet national treasure. There were a total of 4 gourmet national treasures in the human world. Each gourmet national treasure represented the highest point in their respective fields. Although they wouldn't say they had reached the limit in their own industry, they had walked ahead of everyone else in the human world. Setsuno represented chefs. In the world of Toriko, chefs and gourmet hunters were the 2 most common major professions. To be able to reach the pinnacle in these 2 professions and be recognized by everyone, that was really terrifying. And Setsuno's title of gourmet national treasure wasn't fake. Setsuno's culinary skills were only suppressed by Frozy. As for Komatsu and Joie, one of them purely relied on the guidance of ingredients, basically cooking by hearing the voice of ingredients. The other was an old monster who had lived for who knows how many years. So, in a sense, Setsuno was number 1 in culinary arts among humans. If it were any other chef, their first reaction upon seeing Setsuno would definitely be to ask for an autograph or a photo. Young man, you should know my reputation, right? Even so, you still want to challenge me? Setsuno became interested. She didn't think Yuki could surpass her in culinary skills. She hadn't been messing around for these 500 years. In the original story, Setsuno's ranking on the chef ranking wasn't number 1, but second. The main reason was because she hadn't participated in the last few gourmet festivals, so the first place ended up being Zaza's. In terms of number of wins and consecutive wins, Setsuno still had the most. I know. Gourmet national treasure, the undisputed number 1 chef among humans. But it's precisely because of this that I want to challenge you. Yuki was very curious about how far the current Setsuno was from the level of chef god. In the original story, the only person to reach this step was Frozy. But now Frozy was already dead. Although Frozy could still be found in the soul world, Yuki couldn't enter the soul world now. Not a single bit of fear. What an interesting young man. In that case, follow me to the kitchen. Setsuno's impression of Yuki was quite good, and she could see that the words Yuki said weren't lies. He truly didn't care about her status and wanted to compete with her. She was somewhat curious about what level of culinary skills Yuki possessed. Just like that, the three of them went all the way to Setsuno's underground kitchen. This underground kitchen was divided into several completely different areas. In these areas, there were various kinds of ingredients. Yuki was actually very unfamiliar with these ingredients. Yuki wasn't born in this world. He was relatively unfamiliar with the various ingredients of this world. Yuki planned to do another thing after competing with Setsuno. Help her regain her youth. This wasn't a transaction. Or maybe it was a transaction, just that what Yuki needed was Setsuno's goodwill. With Setsuno's goodwill, he would have preferential treatment in all aspects of the human world later on. Maybe he could even learn Jiro's knocking techniques. Yuki was very interested in that kind of knocking technique. After all, in the very late stages, the technique of knocking had already begun to evolve into a concept-level ability. Stopping the Earth's rotation with a point, stopping a person's time with a point, and a series of other operations, how could Yuki not covet it? But asking for knocking Master Jiro's techniques wasn't that easy. He wasn't Teppei, who was related to knocking Master Jiro. So, he could only go through Setsuno. As long as it was proposed by Setsuno, Jiro would definitely agree. Magnificent! Looking at such a huge underground space, and the various kinds of ingredients placed here, Yuki said with some emotion. Even though he had seen the plot in the original story and knew the scale of Setsuno's kitchen was very large. But what was shown in the anime was only a small part of it. Seeing it with one's own eyes was completely different. The technology in the world of Toriko was quite advanced. There were not a few buildings that would be considered wonders of wonders in other worlds. Ha 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 ha. Very impressive, right? Hearing this, Setsuno was quite happy with Yuki's reaction. Setsuno's personality was just like this, seeing others surprised by her actions would satisfy her vanity. Just as Setsuno was about to lead the way out, suddenly, some changes occurred in all the ingredients in the underground kitchen. At the same time, Yuki clearly sensed a very noisy sound in his ears. These sounds gradually became clear. This was the ingredients guiding Yuki on how to cook them. And the ingredients at this moment emitted a golden light. However, not everyone could see this light, only chefs who could hear the voice of the ingredients could see it. Undoubtedly, Yuki heard the voice of the ingredients. This move was very useful in the very late stages of the plot. The simplified cooking methods for the 8 ingredients of Acacia's full-course menu all required the ingredients to provide guidance. Komatsu also knew how to simplify the dishes because he heard this voice. Otherwise, when the gourmet solar eclipse arrived, these ingredients simply couldn't be cooked successfully. You actually made so many ingredients emit their voices. Even Setsuno was stunned at this moment. Because this spectacle, she had never even seen it on her master, Frozy. Even though Frozy could make many ingredients emit their voices, it wasn't as exaggerated as Yuki, who made all the ingredients rush to emit their voices, as if afraid Yuki wouldn't come to cook them. Chapter 126, Special Properties of Ki, the Traits of Growth-Type Gourmet Cells. I don't know either. Yuki himself was somewhat dumbfounded. He really hadn't expected this situation to occur. He knew that once culinary skills reached a certain level, one could hear the voice of ingredients. Of course, this was a characteristic of the world of Toriko. The ingredients of the world of Toriko were different from the ingredients of other worlds. Ingredients from other worlds would be afraid of death, afraid of being eaten, but the ingredients of the world of Toriko, after acknowledging a chef, would come to the door themselves and teach the chef how to cook them. In the original story, the reason Komatsu could hear the voice of ingredients was, besides his pure heart, also because the gourmet luck on him was very powerful. Komatsu and Zanga, these two were known as the strongest gourmet luck in the world of Toriko. With these two together, there was basically no need to worry about any danger. Komatsu relied on his super gourmet luck to hear the voice of ingredients. The reason for saying so was because the frequency at which Komatsu heard the voice of ingredients was too high. This situation had already occurred when he was in the human world. Why did Setsuno dining hall only open once in a while? It was because she couldn't hear the voice of ingredients every single moment. Even during the time Komatsu was in the human world, in terms of the frequency of hearing the voice of ingredients, Setsuno couldn't compare to him. So, hearing the voice of ingredients was related to culinary skills, but not particularly much. It relied more on gourmet luck. Yuki could be certain of one thing: he shouldn't have such powerful gourmet luck on him, or even have gourmet luck at all. After all, he had just arrived in this world, he hadn't grown up in this world. How could gourmet luck directly attach itself to him? So now, he was somewhat baffled. However, Yuki began to think about what went wrong to make these ingredients acknowledge him so much. Gourmet cells definitely aren't it. Culinary skills are also unlikely. Yuki began to think about what was so special about him. Ultimately, Yuki focused his attention on culinary heart and ki. His culinary heart was domineering. Perhaps these ingredients sensed his culinary heart and thus submitted and emitted their voices. Or perhaps it was because of ki. Ki was very special in the world of Dragon Ball and Cooking Master Boy. And ki had the ability to modify ingredients, even allowing ingredients to be preserved indefinitely. Operations like purifying ingredients were quite simple. So, in summary, perhaps it was because of ki. After all, this was something the world of Toriko didn't have, and ki had a miraculous effect on ingredients. Thinking of this, Yuki mobilized the ki in his body, concentrating it in his hand. The next second, the golden light on all the ingredients became even more intense. It really is because of ki. Yuki was certain. It was because of ki that the ingredients in this world would emit their voices. Although he had also obtained ingredients from this world before, those ingredients weren't in this world. A similar situation had occurred in the world of Food Wars. Eishi Tsukasa's special ability was to talk to ingredients. However, that was his exclusive special ability, not a characteristic of the world. In the world of Toriko, as long as one was acknowledged, then they could hear the voice of ingredients. Of course, this was something only chefs could do. Non-chefs couldn't hear the voice of ingredients. A special energy, different from calories. Is it because of this special energy that he gained the acknowledgement of the ingredients? Setsuno obviously noticed the special energy on Yuki's hand. She was very interested in this special energy, but she knew now was not the time to ask directly. Their relationship was still that of strangers. While she had a good impression of Yuki, it didn't mean she could directly ask Yuki about this aspect. So now, she held back from asking. Looking at the ingredients emitting golden light, Yuki directly shielded the ki within his body. This way, the outside world couldn't sense the ki within him, and the ingredients also returned to their normal state. Master, just now that was... Nono finally recovered her senses at this moment, looking at Setsuno with disbelief. Don't mind it, Nono. Just pretend nothing happened. After Setsuno said a word, she walked towards another room. Hearing this, Nono understood what her master meant. She wasn't stupid. She guessed this change happened because of Yuki, so she didn't ask any more questions. Afterwards, the group came to a huge room. In the center of this room was a large pot hundreds of meters high. We'll talk about the competition later. Since you brought news of the century soup, then you should witness this unfinished version of it. After speaking, Setsuno directly leaped up. Instantly, she appeared above the large pot. Seeing this, Yuki leaped up. His current cell level could naturally do this. Nono also followed closely behind. The three of them thus successively jumped to the landing point above the large pot. Your gourmet cell level isn't low either. Setsuno looked at Yuki with some surprise. She had thought Yuki would slowly climb up from the stairs. She didn't expect Yuki to come here with just one jump. It can be considered average. After all, I haven't eaten many good things, Yuki said with a smile. His words were true. He indeed hadn't eaten many good things. The reason he had a high cell level was entirely because of his growth-type gourmet cells. This was the benefit of growth-type. Even if the cell level had already reached this extent, if he now ate very special ingredients like the rainbow fruit, his gourmet cells could still be activated. Never had anything good to eat? You're full of surprises, kid. Setsuno's words were laced with genuine shock. She could tell that Yuki's gourmet cells were at a high level, and reaching that stage was impossible with normal ingredients. Why was it that countless people possessed gourmet cells, yet only a handful ever became strong enough to enter the gourmet world? It was because without taking immense risks to acquire incredibly rare ingredients, the growth of gourmet cells was painfully slow. Even Toriko and Komatsu, the series protagonists blessed with extraordinary gourmet luck, had to navigate multiple life-or-death crises. They always managed to pull through, but if the main characters had it that rough, what chance did anyone else have? Avoiding risk meant stagnation. Embracing it meant a sky-high mortality rate. This stark reality was why so few could ever set foot in the gourmet world. Out of the tens of billions in the human world, only a few dozen ever made the cut. Of course, it was possible to have powerful figures gather the ingredients for you, forcibly leveling someone up to the entry standard for the gourmet world. But a person raised that way would have almost no real combat prowess. The gourmet world was a minefield of constant danger. Sending someone with zero combat experience there was just sending them to their death. Besides, the resources required to train a being with a capture level over 100 were astronomical. Setsuno could tell that Yuki wasn't lying. After 500 years, she could spot a lie in an instant. It made her genuinely curious about him. If he hadn't eaten many rare ingredients, the only explanation for his advanced gourmet cells was that they were unique. Not all gourmet cells evolved just by eating delicious food, there were always a few odd exceptions. Sunny's sister, Rin, was a perfect example. Her gourmet cells seemed normal, but after being attacked by Stajan, they reacted to her love for Toriko. Midora was another. His full course menu was comprised of his family and Frozy, with Frozy making up the largest part. What he needed wasn't just good food, it was Frozy, the first person to ever show him motherly love. These highly specialized gourmet cells required different kinds of nourishment. Some might even need to consume specific emotions. Such cases were exceedingly rare, though. Most still relied on eating all sorts of gourmet food. Yuki's situation didn't strike Setsuno as particularly bizarre. Since the discovery of gourmet cells, despite the number of people who possessed them, no one had ever figured out how to artificially and perfectly integrate them into a human body. Unless you were born with them, any attempt at later integration came with severe side effects. The most likely outcome was death. A tiny fraction might survive, but they would suffer from complications. The people of the gourmet underground were the most classic example. Chapter 127, Setsuno's Surprise, the Method to Regain Youth. Well, now's not the time for that. Take a look. The food in this pot is the century soup, an incomplete version, of course. It can only be finished when the time is right. The more Setsuno thought about it, the more she believed Yuki's idea was right. It was the only way to truly recreate the century soup. What an incredible dish! May I ask how many ingredients the century soup requires? Yuki asked, gazing down at the massive pot below. The version from the ice hell required 138,569 ingredients. The one I'm making uses 269,652. Many of the ingredients from the gourmet show window are extinct in this era, so I had to find substitutes. For some of them, it took a dozen or more other ingredients combined just to replicate the effect of the ancient original. That's why the ingredient count for the century soup skyrocketed from just over 130,000 to more than 260,000. Setsuno's explanation made Yuki realize just how much of a cheat Komatsu's ability truly was. Being able to hear the voices of ingredients saved an enormous amount of time and even let him bypass many steps entirely, a fact that became clear when he was preparing Acacia's full 8-course menu. Komatsu's version must have reduced the ingredient count to a level far below even the original. After viewing the century soup, Setsuno didn't offer Yuki a taste. Instead, she led him to another kitchen to have a match. According to her, the information Yuki had brought was indeed crucial. After their competition, she would treat him to a meal, and the century soup would naturally be one of the courses. Their match was witnessed by Nono. While preparing his dish, Yuki encountered ingredients he didn't recognize. He wasn't using his key, so he couldn't hear the voices of the ingredients. But his evolving touch and vision fed him detailed information about them. As long as the ingredients weren't of an extremely high level or incredibly unique, his enhanced senses could analyze them completely. So this flame is the power of his appetite demon? It's perfectly suited for a chef. Setsuno's eyes lit up when she saw Yuki unleash his inferno. His ability was arguably the most ideal for a chef, but she believed it was a power granted by his gourmet cells. An ability like that couldn't be stolen. To wield such a unique power, one needed the recognition of a specific appetite demon, making it impossible to take. Yuki once again prepared a fire-based dish, his specialty, but in the end, he couldn't help but shake his head. The reason was simple. He lost, and it wasn't even close. Setsuno had lived for over 500 years. She was also a master of food honor, and she even knew techniques like the Enbu. Against Setsuno, Yuki had no advantage whatsoever. He was utterly defeated. Setsuno's culinary skill was worlds beyond that of the graduates. Yuki also sensed what Setsuno's culinary heart was. It was love, specifically her love for Jiro. It was a love of incredible purity, one that had endured for 500 years. In the story's final arc, when Jiro went to confront the Blue Nitro, he knew his techniques were so powerful they could endanger the human world. It was Setsuno who stood in the human world and single-handedly raised a pressure dome, blocking the attacks from Jiro and the others. She was able to accomplish this only because she was putting her life on the absolute line. Her pressure dome had astonishing defensive power, but to block attacks of that magnitude, she had to consume her own life force. By that time, Setsuno was already very old and couldn't sustain it for long, yet she chose to raise the dome anyway. Part of her reason was to protect the human world. The other part was so that Jiro could unleash his full power without any hesitation or fear. Setsuno and Jiro's love for each other remained unshakable, even after centuries. That was the source of her culinary heart of love. An emperor's heart. It's still in its infancy, but to possess such a culinary heart is remarkable. Setsuno remarked with a hint of awe. A culinary heart was the truest reflection of a chef's inner self, something that could never be faked. You could understand a person's very nature just by sensing their culinary heart. Yuki's emperor's heart signified that he held the ambition to stand at the pinnacle of the world. Such a culinary heart was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it could dominate everything. On the other, it all depended on whether the user could bear its weight. If they couldn't, the result would be tragic. Stagnation would be the least of their worries. A regression in their culinary skills was a far greater possibility. So, Setsuno was deeply impressed. Beyond that, she had also gauged the strength of his cooking. Without a doubt, Yuki's skills were excellent, even top-tier among her own peers. Setsuno suddenly had the idea of taking him on as a student. But then she glanced at Nono and decided against it. Still, guiding a promising youngster wouldn't hurt. Leaving the kitchen, Yuki was still replaying the duel in his mind. He may have lost, but as Soma Yukihara always said, failure was a priceless experience. It would allow him to grow even faster. And it was true. By carefully analyzing the match, he could identify the strengths in his opponent's dish, absorb them, and use them to elevate his own craft. Later, Yuki tasted the dishes Setsuno had prepared. The ingredients she used weren't particularly rare, but one was incredibly special. The incomplete version of the century soup. Though unfinished, it already had an effect on his gourmet cells. Yuki felt his level rise slightly. It was a shame it wasn't the complete version, otherwise, a single bowl would have surely triggered a full cell activation. There was a special state in the advancement of gourmet cells called cell activation. Normally, leveling up gourmet cells by one level required consuming massive amounts of food and a long period of assimilation. But cell activation was different. Once it occurred, one's power would skyrocket. The boost from cell activation was far greater than a normal level up, making it the most desirable path for growth. However, the ingredients required to trigger it were exceptionally rare. This century soup is on another level. A normal person couldn't even see the ingredients clearly with the naked eye. And the weight of it, no wonder, for a soup that concentrates over 260,000 ingredients. Although Yuki was no stranger to combining flavors in his own cooking, there was simply no comparing it to the incomplete century soup that Setsuno had created. The sheer number of ingredients, over 260,000, was enough to make one's scalp tingle just hearing it. Of course, this was also because Yuki's own power was still insufficient. In the world of Toriko, powerful chefs possessed immense combat strength. The number of ingredients might seem staggering, but with enough power, one's mind and cooking speed would accelerate. With such high efficiency, completing a dish like this was not an issue. Furthermore, Setsuno's century soup, with its 260,000 plus ingredients, wasn't made by simply following a recipe. It was the result of decades spent constantly modifying an ancient one. That's why it took even a chef of her caliber decades to reach this point. Komatsu, on the other hand, could directly hear the voices of the ingredients. Guided by them, he was like a player with cheat codes enabled, completely bypassing the problems Setsuno faced. That was how he was able to create the century soup so quickly. Taking a sip of the soup, Yuki could feel countless ingredients flashing through his mind, though he recognized almost none of them. After finishing his meal, Yuki was thoroughly satisfied. The food Setsuno prepared was not only delicious but also incredibly generous in portion size. Even a super eater like him was completely full. By the time Yuki was full, a large crowd had already gathered outside Setsuno's diner. They were all locals or tourists drawn by the aroma. The moment they caught the scent, they knew Setsuno's was open, so they could only wait outside. They wouldn't dare rush in, they just stood there, hoping to savor the aroma with their own meals. Granny Setsu. Miss Setsuno, I have another deal I'd like to propose. Yuki had been about to call her Granny Setsuno again, but he caught the strange look she gave him and immediately corrected himself. He promptly changed his address. Only then did Setsuno nod, her expression one of satisfaction. Another deal? You have other information comparable to the secret of the century soup? Hearing this, even Setsuno was surprised, wondering what on earth Yuki was all about. I do. And it's incredibly important to you. I might have a way to restore someone's youth. Of course, I can't guarantee it's 100% effective, so, would you like to give it a try? Yuki asked with a grin, confident that this was an offer few women could resist. Chapter 128, Extending Life, Restoring Youth, a thrilled Setsuno. Although Yuki was fairly confident, he didn't overpromise. What if something went wrong? The ability to restore youth? You aren't talking about knocking, are you, kid? If so, then forget it. While knocking can restore the body to its peak for a time, it's not permanent. Any external force will cause it to revert. Setsuno shook her head. People use that method for two reasons: 1, to reclaim a youthful state, and 2, to maintain peak condition during a fight. For someone like Setsuno, a fleeting moment of youth held no appeal. As for her combat power, she was always at her peak, even in old age. The gap between her and someone like her friend Granny Ayam was astronomical. Though they were friends, Granny Ayam's power level was less than 100. Setsuno's, while never explicitly stated, was at least in the thousands based on her feats. The difference was just too vast. Of course not. This isn't about knocking. I'm talking about permanently returning to a youthful state. So, care to give it a try? Yuki shook his head. The method he was proposing was incredibly special, something only he could do in this world. Permanently return to a youthful state? Are you certain you can do that, kid? And what do you want in exchange? Setsuno's face grew serious as she asked. If Yuki could really do it, it would be wonderful news, but she also needed to know what he wanted in return. This time, I want to trade for friendship. Yuki stated his terms plainly. That's right, he wanted the friendship of Setsuno and Jiro. That bond was more valuable than anything else. He could have just offered it for free, but the meaning was the same, so he might as well be direct about it. The moment he spoke, Setsuno understood what he was after. In short, Yuki wanted to align himself with them. With them as his backers, navigating the human world would be a breeze. He would even benefit after entering the gourmet world, since both Setsuno and Jiro could come and go as they pleased. Furthermore, Jiro was the son of the Wolf King, Guinness, which meant he could practically walk sideways on the second continent. Of course, even without that background, Jiro's own strength was more than enough to let him do whatever he wanted. In any case, building a good relationship with these two was equivalent to building one with the IGO. The benefits were endless. And all Yuki had to do was transfer a portion of his life energy to Setsuno. For him, life energy was something he could obtain with a wave of his hand, it was nothing to be stingy about. Trading life energy for their friendship was like buying a bustling city mall for $1, it was the deal of a lifetime. I see. You're quite direct, kid. Anyone else would have probably beaten around the bush. Setsuno said, feeling a bit speechless. Yuki had managed to fluster her, it was the first time she'd met someone so blunt. Nono, standing at the side, was also stunned, clearly not expecting Yuki to be so forward. Is there anything wrong with being direct? I want to have a good relationship with you, Ms. Setsuno. You would have figured it out even if I didn't say it, so why not just be straightforward? Yuki knew that sincerity was the ultimate trump card. He wouldn't dare play mind games with a veteran like Setsuno. She had lived for centuries and had seen every kind of person imaginable. Honesty was more important than anything else. You're right. Beating around the bush is pointless. In that case, I accept this deal. As long as you can restore me to my youthful state, then provided you don't cause any chaos, Jiro and I can be your backing. Setsuno declared. Her decision wasn't based solely on Yuki's ability to restore youth. More importantly, after their earlier interactions, she had come to admire him. His culinary skill was beyond question. As for his talent, she could easily tell his age, and to have reached such a level so young was something she had never seen before. Furthermore, his performance just now showed that he had a good character. And most critically, he possessed the ability to be acknowledged by ingredients. In Setsuno's eyes, anyone acknowledged by ingredients was a good person. Even if Yuki used some kind of trick, the ingredients themselves weren't foolish. A young man with such immense potential, powerful abilities, and a solid character, of course Setsuno was ready to support him. It was just like with Komatsu in the original story. After learning of Komatsu's situation, Setsuno took great care of him, often sending him on tasks. By completing those tasks, Komatsu gained a clearer understanding of his own growth. Right now, Komatsu had yet to show his full, incredible talent. Yuki's talent, however, was undeniably the strongest. So Setsuno certainly wouldn't pass up the chance to help such a youth. It just so happened that Yuki wanted to build a good relationship with her, so she readily agreed. In truth, even if Yuki couldn't restore her to her youth, Setsuno would have chosen to help him anyway. Forming a bond with a young man of such potential was an absolutely sound investment. Then let's begin now. Yuki didn't waste any time. Since Setsuno had agreed, he got right to it. Don't you need to make any preparations? Setsuno couldn't help but ask. Was the method to restore youth really this simple? No need. This power originates from within me. As Yuki spoke, he channeled the ki within his body. As his ki grew stronger, it also granted him many new abilities, such as storing and stripping life energy, which he could now do with ease. He didn't even need the other person's consent, provided they were weaker than him. He couldn't drain the lifespan of someone stronger. And he would never randomly take a human's lifespan. Life energy existed in humans, but also in plants and animals. Yuki could draw life energy from them. Injecting the life energy from his ki directly into Setsuno's body, Yuki quickly discovered that while it worked, the amount required for someone with immense strength and a higher level of existence was far greater. The amount of life energy that could grant a normal person an extra year of life could only extend Setsuno's by a single day. Luckily, Yuki had more than enough life energy on hand, and he could always find more plants and animals to draw from, so he wasn't worried about running out. He also found that because Setsuno's body was so powerful, he could inject a massive amount of life energy at once without her suffering any side effects. It made sense, though. Setsuno's cell level was in the thousands. It would be stranger if a body that strong couldn't handle this much life energy. As a torrent of life energy poured into her, Setsuno herself could feel the changes. She felt her back slowly straightening. Her hair began to grow rapidly, the sensation just like eating the soap bubble fruit from the food on her temple. Her pink hair quickly grew until it touched the ground. The wrinkles on her face vanished, and her figure became more toned and defined. Nono watched with wide eyes as her master transformed from an old woman into a young woman. Alright, this should be the optimal state. Your strength is frightening. The life energy that could give a normal person an extra year of life can only extend yours by a day. Yuki couldn't help but comment. Wait, did you just say, extend my life? Hearing Yuki's words, Setsuno's expression changed. That's right, it does increase your lifespan. The so-called restoration of youth is just injecting life energy to increase your lifespan. Your body then naturally reverts to its youthful state. Yuki nodded, confirming it. It can actually increase lifespan. Your ability is truly unbelievable. But are there no side effects for you? Setsuno couldn't help but ask. Any technique with immense power, no matter its purpose, was bound to have significant drawbacks. Jiro's Guinness Punch was a prime example. Its power and range were colossal, but it had one major flaw: once unleashed, the attack was uncontrollable. Who knew where it would end up? Other powerful techniques also placed a heavy burden on Jiro's body. Setsuno's pressure dome was the same. It could defend against incredibly strong attacks, but her life force would be rapidly consumed. Rest assured, my ability has no side effects. Yuki smiled. The ability just had a bit of a cost. Injecting all that life energy had consumed some of his ki, but for his current level of ki, it was nothing. If there was a side effect, it was that a life was exchanged for a life. Except, Yuki didn't have to pay with his own. The price was borne by other life forms, so he had nothing to worry about. No side effects, your ability is frighteningly powerful. Hearing this, Setsuno's lip twitched. She reached up, and with a quick swipe of her hand, her long pink hair was cut short. She then styled the remaining hair into twin tails. This look takes me back. Though my strength hasn't changed, my whole mindset has been affected. Setsuno remarked. The change in her mental state was brought on by the change in her physical condition. It wasn't a negative thing, on the contrary, it was a perfectly normal reaction. Master, if you appeared in public like this, you'd probably shock everyone. Nono said with a smile. Seeing his master restored to her youth, and with her lifespan extended, was undoubtedly a joyous occasion. You've reminded me of something. To avoid unnecessary trouble, it seems I'll need a disguise when I go out from now on. Setsuno nodded. She wasn't worried about what would happen if she appeared in the outside world because she could disguise herself. She was youthful now, but she could use knocking to revert to her old woman appearance, a trick Jiro was famous for. Jiro's lifespan was practically infinite. When he was young, the Wolf King Guinness constantly brought him red nitro to eat. Jiro grew up eating nitro, so under the influence of that pure appetite, his own cells transformed into appetite. Jiro was essentially a living appetite demon. His lifespan was naturally endless. The Jiro in his peak form was a young man, not an old man at all. The only reason he usually appeared as an old man was because of Setsuno. After all, she was his partner. If his partner became an old woman while he remained young, Setsuno would surely feel terrible. So, Jiro used knocking to make his body appear old. When he wanted to revert, he would simply use knocking again to return to his youthful state. Having been with Jiro for so long, Setsuno naturally knew this trick as well. She decided to use it whenever she went out. As for when she was alone or with familiar people like Ichiryu, she would return to her current form. I never thought your technique could even extend life. I owe you a huge debt, Setsuno said. Restoring youth was one thing, but extending one's lifespan was an entirely different concept. Setsuno didn't want to die. She wanted to stay with Jiro, and she worried about what would happen to him if she passed away. Thanks to Yuki, that problem was now solved. Chapter 129, First Meeting with Knocking Master Jiro, Learning Knocking? Journey to the Ice Hell. You're a sharp young man, Setsuno said, a thoughtful smile playing on her lips. But not in a way that's off-putting. Since that's the case, you can stay here for a while. I'll have someone prepare everything you need. She had taken a real liking to Yuki, especially after witnessing his cooking. In her eyes, his culinary skills were already enough to rank him among the top 10 chefs in the world. While Yuki's cooking still couldn't compare to that of seasoned veterans like herself or Zaz, she knew they only had the advantage of age. Given enough time, it wouldn't be a problem for Yuki to surpass them. As for the younger generation, Setsuno couldn't think of a single person who could hold a candle to him. Yuki was a chef who was close to mastering food honor, and his gourmet cell level was nothing to scoff at. In every respect, he stood at the very pinnacle of his generation. Even her own apprentice, Nono, was no match for him, a conclusion she'd reached after their match. However, she also noticed a few gaps in his knowledge. With that in mind, Setsuno handed Yuki a tablet. This contains the IGO's internal ingredient database. While your senses allow you to grasp an ingredient's properties quickly, you haven't had the chance to study them beforehand, have you? This kind of foundational knowledge is crucial for a chef. She had identified Yuki's weakness. What he needed now was to cram as much information about ingredients as possible. For both a gourmet hunter and a chef, this knowledge was paramount. Yuki nodded, readily admitting it was exactly what he was missing. Later, Setsuno had Nono help Yuki get registered in the system, and a card was delivered along with his new identification. It was a black card with an unlimited credit line, just like the one Toriko used. With this, Yuki wouldn't have to worry about money. Setsuno wasn't concerned about him spending recklessly either. With his level of strength, capturing high-level, rare ingredients was a simple task. For the truly powerful, money was just a number. Yuki's memory was photographic, he could remember anything he saw with perfect clarity. He spent a single night with the database and committed the entire thing to memory. The next day, Setsuno called Yuki over while she was instructing Nono. Yuki knew exactly what she was doing, she intended to teach him as well. He was genuinely grateful. He wasn't so arrogant as to think there was nothing left for a gourmet national treasure like Setsuno to teach him. She possessed countless skills, and he knew he could learn a great deal from her. After the morning lesson, someone new joined them for lunch. It was Knocking Master Jiro, just returned from the gourmet world. Setsu, is that knocking? No, there's no trace of it on you, and your aura, it's become so much more active. What the hell is going on? Jiro had just returned, planning to see Setsuno and grab a bite to eat. He never expected that the little old lady he'd left would have transformed back into the youthful woman from centuries ago. He was an expert in knocking, and he could tell in an instant that she hadn't used them. The weary, twilight aura that had clung to her was gone, replaced by a vibrant energy, the energy of youth. Surprising, isn't it, Jiro? It's all thanks to Yuki. Let me introduce you. This is Yuki. My transformation is his doing. Yuki, this is Jiro. I'm sure you've heard of him. Setsuno introduced them to each other. Of course. The reputation of Knocking Master Jiro precedes him. Yuki nodded politely. It's because of him? What happened? Tell me everything. Jiro sat down at the counter, and Setsuno recounted the whole story. The key to completing the century soup, and not only restoring youth but also extending life. The way Jiro looked at Yuki completely changed. Before, he had seen a stranger. Now, after hearing everything, his expression softened into one of profound friendliness. It was simple. While Setsuno still had plenty of years left and wasn't in any immediate danger of passing away, her life did have a limit. Jiro's greatest fear was Setsuno dying before him, an inevitability he had long dreaded. He was now effectively a living appetite demon, with a nearly infinite lifespan. But Setsuno was still human. She couldn't replicate his experience of eating nitro, as the risks were far too great. If it were possible, Ichiryu would have done the same for the 4 heavenly kings. The fact that he hadn't meant that what happened to Jiro was a fluke that couldn't be repeated. Using that method to grant Setsuno an infinite lifespan was impossible. As for eating the Acacia's full-course menu and having her consume an appetite demon, that was another option, one that would turn her into something like Joie. Joie had taken over Frozy's body, and for hundreds of years, aside from her own modifications, her physical age hadn't changed at all. But acquiring all of Acacia's full-course menu was no easy task, and the time wasn't right yet. If a better method existed, Jiro certainly didn't want to pin all his hopes on Acacia's full-course menu. Yuki's appearance and his ability to do all this without any side effects or cost was the answer to Jiro's deepest prayers. He was, of course, immensely grateful. For Jiro, nothing was more important than Setsuno. A fine young man. Yuki, was it? Are you interested in learning some knocking techniques from me? Jiro asked. It was the only way he could think of to express his gratitude. Of course. The knocking master's fame is legendary. Yuki agreed on the spot. He'd have to be the world's biggest fool to refuse. He knew from the original story just how ridiculously powerful the art of knocking was. Honestly, if Jiro hadn't left Acacia's mouth intact back then, and if he hadn't been worn down from his prior fight with the Blue Nitro, Acacia would have had a much harder time taking him down. Just look at the feats of the 3 great powers of the human world. Each one was more ridiculously powerful than the last. Jiro alone had the strength to wipe out the entire Blue Nitro group. President Ichiryu was the same, going toe-to-toe with Midora without even using the power of Dawn Slime. Then there was Midora. After eating 6 of Acacia's full-course menu, he could still fight evenly with Acacia, who had a capture level of over 20,000, and Acacia wasn't holding back at that point. Although he was still at a disadvantage, it was hard to imagine how strong the 3 of them would have become if they had all eaten the Acacia's full-course menu. Acacia probably would have been left dumbfounded. But alas! 2 of the 3 were taken off the board by the plot, and the last one never completed his menu, leaving him at a disadvantage. Still, their power was undeniable. Now, Jiro was offering to teach him knocking. If Yuki refused, he would be the stupidest person on the planet. Period. You're willing to teach him, Jiro? That's wonderful. The boy's sense of touch is similar to that kid from the 4 Heavenly Kings, the one who plays with his hair. It's perfect for learning knocking. Setsuno nodded in approval. She had a basic understanding of Yuki's abilities, including the fact that his hair had abilities similar to Sunny's. In her view, it was as if he was born to use knocking. His countless strands of hair were like an infinite supply of knocking needles, far more effective than any specially made tool. Right, Jiro, you should go back to your young form, too. After all, I'm not an old lady anymore. Setsuno suddenly said. Jiro nodded instantly. He had only maintained his old man appearance for her sake. Now there was no need. With a few quick taps on his body, Jiro's form seemed to inflate, transforming into the physique of a muscular, well-built man. His face, however, still looked middle-aged. To return to his true youth, he would have to release all his seals. Now that's the handsome Jiro I know. Setsuno immediately started fawning over him. Yuki and Nono just stood there, speechless, forced to witness the public display of affection. This feels much more relaxed. Get me something to eat, Setsu. This is nostalgic, feels just like the old days. It's a shame that Bastard isn't on the same path as us anymore. Jiro's voice was tinged with helplessness. Their big family back then had been wonderful, but then Frozy died, Acacia disappeared, and Midora left. A perfectly good home, shattered. And from what they had investigated over the years, the cause of it all wasn't Midora, but Acacia. Midora had just been used as a scapegoat. He and Ichiria didn't dare tell Midora the truth. In their eyes, Midora was still their youngest brother, and he shouldn't have to bear that burden. Besides, Midora was the one who cared most about that family. If he found out the truth, who knew what would happen? Jiro, after you eat, I need you to take a trip to the ice hell for me. Take this soup and test it out. The animals in the ice hell. Setsuno laid out her theory. Yuki was a little surprised but also deeply impressed. As expected of a centuries-old master chef. He had only told her that the century soup needed the original as a starter. But it seemed Setsuno had figured out a similar method on her own. Use the blood of those animals for the test? Setsu, are you suspecting that some creature in the ice hell has been eating a lot of the century soup? Jiro asked, immediately grasping her idea. Exactly. The century soup wasn't discovered that long ago. Before that, it appeared once a century. That soup wouldn't just vanish into thin air. Some animal must have eaten it. If a creature consumes a specific ingredient over a long period, it might retain the characteristics of that ingredient, and even pass them down to its offspring. It's not common in nature, but it does happen. Right now, my century soup is just missing a starter. There's a chance something like that exists in the ice hell. So, I need you to go for me, Jiro. Setsuno nodded. She and Jiro had traveled all over the human and gourmet worlds, and they had seen creatures that had absorbed the properties of certain ingredients from their diet. These traits could even be passed down through generations. The most classic example was the monkey clan, though now only the king remained. Once this generation's king died, the pair would likely return. It was originally the easiest of Acacia's full-course menu to capture, but after what the old Monkey King did, pear had become one of the most difficult. I'll go with you. I'm also very interested in the ice hell, and I can help with the cooking experiments. Yuki spoke up. He wanted to go to the ice hell, mainly to see the gourmet show window. In his view, even though the gourmet show window was nearly gone, it was still an excellent teacher. Since the century soup was naturally produced in that environment, there must be traces of it left. So, Yuki wanted to see if he could find any clues. If he discovered something, it would be a huge benefit for him. Besides, the ice hell had other ingredients. He was also quite interested in its guardian, the Tundra Dragon. In the original story, that dragon was killed by the gourmet corp sous chef, Tamirad. Since it was going to die anyway, there was no harm in him capturing it first. As for whether he could beat it, Yuki was quite confident in his own strength. In that case, you can go with Jiro. It's a perfect opportunity for him to teach you knocking techniques. Setsuno nodded. Knocking were incredibly useful for a chef. Chapter 130, Heading to the Ice Hell, the knocking lesson, Tundra Dragon. Perfect. The last time I was looking for the century soup, I used knocking on the ice hell's hellboros. I can release it while we're there this time. Jiro nodded. He used to wander the human world, and since he was often drunk, he would frequently use knocking on various creatures. Many of those creatures were the rulers of their respective regions. After Teppei became a reviver, he often traveled to these places to release the creatures Jiro had sealed. The Hellboros from the original story was released by Teppei, after which it fought with Tamirad's parasite emperor, only to be instantly killed by the Gourmet Corp's head waiter, Alfaro. It was a real hard-luck case. Sealed for over 100 years, finally freed, only to run into the equally powerful parasite emperor. Before a winner could be decided, he was one-shot by a powerhouse from the Gourmet Corporation, seriously unlucky. With the plan set, it was time to eat. They didn't eat a lot. While people with gourmet cells had astounding appetites, especially at Jiro's level, where they could eat non-stop if they wanted to. There was no need. They weren't mid-aura. Mid-aura, having lost his full course menu, was in a constant state of hunger. To become a member of the Gourmet Corp, one had to meet a specific condition. Whatever your profession, you also had to be a part-time chef. This was because every member was, in a sense, Medora's partner. Recruiting them was partly to expand the Gourmet Corp, and partly to satisfy Medora's appetite. But to this day, no one had succeeded. Mid-aura was like an insatiably hungry beast, constantly thinking about his next meal. Jiro could become like that if he wanted to, but he wasn't mid-aura, so there was no need. Unless a major battle was imminent and he needed to perform food immersion, they didn't eat much because their energy consumption was low. Once it was time for food immersion, they would need to eat a massive amount. In the original story, before his duel with Mid-aura, Ichiraya had Setsuno act as his temporary partner, preparing a huge feast for him. At their level, the amount of ingredients needed for food immersion was astronomical. After their meal, Yuki and Jiro boarded Setsuno's limousine jellyfish and headed for the ice hell. Although the space inside the limousine jellyfish wasn't huge, it had the ability to fly, walk on land, and travel in the sea. It was an excellent camping jellyfish. Yuki found himself wanting one too. Camping jellyfishes played a huge role in the original story and were essentially mobile homes. But they were incredibly rare. The octomelon that the 4 heavenly kings used to travel to the gourmet world was planted in advance by Ichiryu. By the time the 4 heavenly kings found it, the octomelon was already mature. Its greatest features were its amphibious nature and powerful cloaking ability. In the gourmet world, being able to hide oneself was crucial. Looks like you really like Setsu's limousine jellyfish, huh? Inside the jellyfish, Jiro said with a smile, watching Yuki look around with curiosity. I've heard of camping jellyfishes. They're fantastic mobile homes, and they're incredibly useful in the wild. I've heard that some specific types are a huge help even in the gourmet world. Yuki nodded. He was indeed envious, and there was no need to hide it. He wouldn't say everyone felt the same, but the vast majority would definitely be jealous of a creature like this. That's right, camping jellyfishes can be very useful sometimes. But when your strength reaches a certain level, they become obsolete. If you're interested, I can have Teppei find a suitable one for you later. Revivers are the best at that sort of thing. Right, you don't know who Teppei is, do you? Jiro then explained Teppei's situation. Yuki, of course, knew who Teppei was, but he had to play dumb. After the introductions, Jiro began to explain the basic concepts of knocking. Here, take this knocking gun. It's a long-range sniper model. Setsu told me about your abilities. They're similar to that kid Sunny's, which makes you well suited for learning knocking. Your hair, compared to guns or your limbs, has the advantage of stealth. Of course, it has drawbacks too. 1. It's only for close-range attacks. 2. It lacks power unless you bundle a large amount of hair together, but then you lose the element of surprise. Jiro explained that the sniper-type knocking gun had a maximum range of 10 kilometers. Of course, once you learn the proper techniques for using calories, this gun will be useless, Jiro added. There were special ways to use calories. They could be projected out of the body for attacks. Toriko's flying fork was a classic example. Yuki could use similar techniques, but they required training and consumed calories. The knocking gun was useful for conserving calories in the early stages when his reserves were still low. Yuki was a complete novice when it came to knocking, so Jiro had to start with the absolute basics. I've divided knocking into 3 levels. The first is low level. At this stage, you often need to use a knocking gun, otherwise it's very difficult. And you must target specific knocking on humans and animals. The second level is mid-level. At this point, you're no longer restricted to using tools like the gun. You can use your hands, feet, and even your calories as tools for knocking. Furthermore, when applying knocking, you don't need to worry about specific locations. Any part of the body can be a target. As for high level, that's where I am now. But only a very few have reached this level, and there are distinctions even within it. Jiro explained the high level. At this stage, one could apply knocking to the natural environment itself. Of course, there were huge differences within the high level. For example, only he and Acacia could stop the Earth's rotation. That's why when the Earth's collapse stopped, everyone knew it was Jiro's doing. Although Teppei was the one who technically stopped it in the end, he did so under Jiro's guidance, not independently. Moreover, Teppei was in Area Zero at the time, a world at the planet's core. From there, he was closest to the Earth's heart. If he had been on the surface, his strike likely wouldn't have been effective enough to stop the collapse. So, while Teppei inherited the title of Knocking Master, he was still a long way from reaching Jiro's level. Many had mastered high-level knocking. The Blue Nitro, and even the three great chefs among the Red Nitro. But only Jiro and Acacia had reached the pinnacle. After explaining the basics, Jiro began to teach Yuki how to identify knocking. This was even simpler for Yuki. A single glance with his evolving vision, and he could remember and clearly see all the knocking on a person's body. Your talent and abilities are indeed formidable, but you can't become too reliant on them. Right now, you're in the early stages, and your abilities are a great help. But the further you go, the smaller these advantages will become. So you still need to build a solid foundation. And your body is also very important. Some advanced knocking techniques can only be executed with a sufficiently powerful body. Jiro said with a serious expression. Yuki knew this was true. In the original story, even Jiro's body could barely handle the strain after using the eternal knocking technique. It showed just how immense the burden of high-level knocking techniques was. Under Jiro's tutelage, the limousine jellyfish sped towards the ice hell. It had to be said, this creature from the gourmet world was truly something else. The human world was many times larger than the original Earth, yet the limousine jellyfish brought them to the ice hell in just a few short hours. We're here. Time for your first lesson. Your gourmet cells are at a high level, but they have no resistance to low temperatures. The ice hell is the perfect place to acquire that. Jiro said, then explained the various resistances of gourmet cells. In short, gourmet cells had extremely strong adaptability. So, a person with gourmet cells just needed to stay in an extreme environment for a while, and their cells would quickly adapt. Only gourmet cells had this kind of adaptation speed. These resistances were essential for the strong. The reason was simple. While a certain level of gourmet cells could grant immunity to the cold here, the low temperatures of the ice hell were nothing compared to some special regions in the gourmet world. If you didn't adapt now, you'd be in for a world of hurt in the gourmet world. A moment of carelessness could cost you your life. Toriko was a perfect example. Shortly after entering the gourmet world, he encountered all sorts of extreme environments. They had to adapt to all of them. As for a thermal suit, neither Jiro nor Setsuno had prepared one for Yuki, because they felt he didn't need one. Yuki's gourmet cell strength was high. As long as he continuously released calories, his body wouldn't freeze. And before he ran out of calories, his gourmet cells would have already adapted to the environment. It's freezing. Glancing at the world of ice and snow outside, Yuki stepped out directly. In that instant, he felt like he was about to become a popsicle. He could only use a method similar to Toriko's in the original story, making his body vibrate rapidly to generate heat. Of course, this method could only be sustained for a short time before he had to repeat the action. Your gourmet cells have already started adapting to the environment. You need to keep doing what you're doing. With the efficiency of gourmet cells, a few days is all it will take to fully adapt. Jiro said, watching Yuki. He then took the lead and walked deeper into the ice hell. They hadn't gone far when a violent wind, mixed with countless ice spikes, rushed towards Yuki. Anyone weaker would have been turned into a pincushion in seconds. But Yuki didn't need to worry. He could easily dodge them, his enhanced senses were no joke. Besides, even if the ice spikes hit him, they wouldn't be able to break his defense. Roar! Just as Yuki and Jiro were walking, a tremendous roar echoed. Looks like the guardian of the ice hell has found us. Jiro looked up and saw a bizarrely shaped dragon. I remember this guy is a distant relative of the savannah dragon, right? I hear it tastes pretty good too. Yuki said. He had memorized all the data, so he recognized the tundra dragon at a glance and knew that both it and the savannah dragon were delicious. For the human world, the tundra dragon does taste pretty good. What? You want to capture it? Jiro asked after a glance at Yuki. I was thinking about it. Yuki nodded. In that case, go give it a try. It's a good chance to test the knocking techniques you just learned. While this big guy is a bit much for a novice's first experiment, your gourmet cell level is high, so it's just right for you. Jiro said. For a beginner, they would usually start practicing knocking on small animals, but Yuki didn't need to. The reason was simple: Yuki was too strong, and he could directly map out the creature's body structure. Under these circumstances, the problems a novice would face wouldn't apply to him. What Yuki lacked was direct combat experience. As for whether killing the tundra dragon would have any impact on the ice hell, there was no need to worry. Without the tundra dragon, the ice hell would remain the ice hell. That wraps up this part of What If Fishing System in Food Wars World. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.